Hi again, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. So, before we dive into the questions and start the interview, I'd love to learn more about you, to hear a little bit about you and Sonde, maybe just a quick overview of what you're working on and the problems you're solving and what you're building.
Sure. So yeah, I've been doing software engineering for decades and done a lot of developer tools in that time. I've worked at various companies that were very language centric. I worked at Borland on the Delphi team. Actually, all of the developer tool products. So my focus has always been sustainable engineering. So one of my pet peeves is when I work at a company that's a startup and there's we're a startup, we can we'll clean that up later.
Yeah.
There's never a later, and there's absolutely no reason to implement substandard code practices in the first place, because if you do them right away, everything happens faster. You can make changes more quickly. So AI, my perspective, the reason why I started Sonde is AI made that problem way worse. Like it took the startup mentality and it's like, well, now we can make stuff that looks good really fast.
Yeah.
And like 4 months down the road, when you actually have customers start using it and you have to make fundamental changes, you basically have to start over, because you have not designed the underlying architecture well. So that's why I started working with agentic tools really heavily last year around this time. I'd been at Google working on calling Vertex AI via the APIs and stuff. But when the agentic tools came out, I started noticing they tend to do the same kinds of bad code. And I kept trying to, well, anyway, you have questions about, but anyway, that was the inspiration for Sonde. I was like, no matter what I do, they keep doing this.
Yes.
I need something that will get them in line. And that was the primary inspiration for Sonde. And then all of the other capabilities that it has were all built on that analytic capability that Sonde has.
Okay, amazing. And thank you for sharing. It looks like you've been building something very interesting and really important for the industry. And also like you take like a different initiative than the other always takes. So especially as a AI generated code becomes more prevalent in this era, right?
Yeah.
So now that I understand a bit more about you and Sonde, and before we dive into the questions, let me give you some context about who we are and why we are excited to speak with you today. Our company is Tailored Talent, and we connect tech talent with US companies. And right now, we are running a market research initiative focused on understanding how AI is shaping engineering, technology, and business strategies. So, we are speaking with leaders like you to capture insights that will be shared with our community of over 60,000 LinkedIn followers, and many of whom are tech leaders, founders, and professionals who I'm sure and confident that they will find your perspective incredibly valuable. And with that context, I love to dive into some topics and hear your thoughts, but feel free to speak freely. We want this to feel like a conversation rather than a strict Q&A session, right? So
Okay. Sure.
I know that you mentioned something about the inspiration to build Sonde, but the first question is, what inspired you to build Sonde, and what problem were you most determined to solve? But how did previous experience shape designs of Sonde? How it work?
Right. So I felt the lack of understanding of the code that AI was building for me. I've used all of the major agentic tools. I've used Gemini and OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Cursor, all of them, just to see how they worked and what worked well and what didn't. And for all of them, the process was extremely opaque, and there was no way to keep up with the amount of code that generated and review all of the things that were in the code. And I would discover things downstream, issues with, oh, I thought this was all working, and now I find out that that code is not at all what it should have been written like. And so I tried to rely on Markdown and guidelines and rules and guardrails, and like Anthropic, has developed skills which are very powerful, but they also said, you have these guardrails, you can declare these guardrails, and Claude won't deviate from those guardrails, and it does all the time. And so I was like, I can't rely on the tools that the AI providers, the agentic coding vendors are providing, because they don't work the way they claim. As the AI engines, as the LLMs get smarter, they figure out more ways to get around their constraints. So I built Sonde to inject it into that coding process, that development process, so that everything was deterministic. Every time you had a code issue, it was consistent, it was provable, it was very specific to find. And when the AI tool tried to do a merge, there'd be a hook that would run Sonde's linter and say, nope, you can't commit this code, or you can't merge this code. So the AI tool had to fix it. And all of the rules, all of the constraints for Sonde are based on what I specify as a senior engineer the code should be like. So it's not a human reviewing the code, but it is a tool that exactly follows the rules that a human specifies for what the code should look like, which is not what you get with AI. Every time you run a review with AI, it'll find something different.
Yes. And it's clear the problem you're solving is becoming more critical as AI writes more codes, right?
Yes. Yeah. As the volume increases, the issue becomes worse. And the thing that's great is Sonde is actually faster than AI. AI can generate code, Sonde can analyze the code faster than AI generates the code.
Okay.
So the scalability problem that we see with AI as well, the larger your code base, the more AI struggles to understand it. And AI only looks at the current problem. So what happens is, like you say, I need you to fix this bug. So it fixes that bug. And then the next step is it iterates over and over and over. Oh, there's a broken test now. I'll fix the broken test. And then it iterates again. Oh, there's another broken test. I'll fix that. Oh, this other code got broken because of this change that I made. So it just churns and chews up your tokens and your time. And so having something that analyzes, that understands all of the code end to end the entire time is critical to prevent a whole bunch of false starts and a whole bunch of iterative, okay, well, we fixed this version of the problem. Now we got to run all the tests again and find the next thing. It's just very inefficient. And the problem is that if you trust what the vendors of AI are telling you about the generated code getting better, and don't look at that stuff, you don't know about these hidden problems. And what you're doing is you think you're getting more productive and higher velocity with the stuff that you're producing. And what you're doing is you're actually pushing the quality burden to the right down to the people who are actually using your system
Yeah,
they're discovering the bugs.
it's a very interesting process.
Yeah, and that's not going to make anybody happy, and your net velocity is much slower, because then you've got to find where the problems are that the user reported, and you're looking at, agentic code produces far more lines of code than a human would writing the same thing.
Yes. And since the problem is becoming more critical as AI writes more code, as AI agents start writing more code, what do you see as the biggest risk of engineering teams?
Well, first, a big engineering risk that I see is that nobody knows the code anymore. So the understand, like a senior engineer or an experienced engineer who's working in your code base for a year, and they're told, oh, there's a bug here or there's a problem here, they generally know where to go to find the issue and dive in and investigate it. And that reliance on pushing everything to AI and having that doing the code for you is that you're then at the mercy of whatever the AI thinks the issue is, that you need to find. So that could be a multi-day exploration process that you do, where you're chatting with the AI and going, no, that didn't fix it either. Find, look somewhere else.
Okay, so it's not just about the speed, it's also about reliability and traceability, right?
Yeah, it's about the current, well, it's no longer current. The previous development practice, you had engineers who understood the code base, right? And now AI is generating the code, and the engineers can't keep up
Yes.
with the code base. So they just have to rely on AI more for it. And you might find completely different behaviors with the next version of the LLM that you're using when you upgrade, the next Opus or the next, GPT. It might do things differently than the previous version did.
Yeah.
So it's just AI. Don't get me wrong. I'm primarily developing Sonde with AI. The ironic thing is I'm using AI to reduce the reliance on AI. And I think a really good pattern that people should try and think about when they're using AI is, let's make sure that the infrastructure that we depend on for running our business is deterministic. It's 100% repeatable. The logic is grounded in computer science and good engineering principles, not relying on an AI's LLM pattern matcher to extrapolate the correct pattern, because the pattern is going to be different with every model. It's going to change. It's always going to be a moving target.
It's like the AI is the problem, but also is the solution. So it's impossible to now use AI.
Yeah, and one of your questions that you had is why can't you use AI to control AI, to monitor, and that's the reason, is you never know what things it's going to catch versus what things it's going to miss.
Yes. And how do you think about verifying AI generated code in a deterministic and trustworthy way?
I just keep adding. So in Sonde, they're called probes, but they're rules about how to analyze the code and the code patterns that you find. And it's not just source code; it's your database schema, your infrastructure for your microservices, all of those things, right? All of those are relevant. Anything that a computer understands, Sonde needs to analyze. So what I've been doing, why we're still in alpha, is every time I think I'm at the point where we're ready to launch, I'll go, oh, this whole category of issues, we don't have anything to analyze those. We don't have anything to make, to have the rules that are clear. And the thing that's fantastic about about the computer science industry and the software industry is we have people way smarter than me describing the correct way to do things and algorithmic ways of verifying what they do, what the code does and how it works. And I'm just applying those public algorithms, those published, algorithms to what Sonde does, so that while agents continue to generate code and do pattern matching that may be fantastic, may be horrible, but you don't know.
Yeah.
That's why Sonde is there to try and say, okay, these are all consistent, irrevocable standards that we care about in our code. And it will always find things that violate those standards.
Okay.
And so there, like if I launch Sonde next week, if I took it out of alpha, people are going to find things. Hey, you didn't catch this. You didn't catch that. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we don't have that situation captured yet. But when we do, it will be 100% consistent. Right.
Yeah.
And that to me is the most important thing when a company is basing their business on software and they have to care about legal exposure for accessibility, for PII leakage, for financial information leakage. You're not going to want AI vibes for that. You're going to want proof. You're going to want evidence that says, okay, this code changed on this date, and it was in these lines of code that the behavior changed.
Yeah.
Right?
It's moving so fast, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. With that, what do you think AI reviewing AI is not enough?
I think it's because, again, the AI, we have not, so you have 2 million lines of code in your repository. There isn't an AI tool that can give you the full picture of all those 2 million lines of code and tell you, you have these properties in your front end that are making these calls to your back end. And unless you tell it to look specifically at that one scenario, it could very easily miss that those names don't match. And you're silently dropping data values, or you've got truncation. Whereas if you know exactly what the rules are for your data schema, for how your API boundary is called by your front end, those are all deterministic. Again, you're modeling what exactly the computer does, not pattern matching what the computer does. So AI reviewing AI, it's going to miss things, and you can never be sure it's done an exhaustive review.
Yes, so AI alone can't guarantee correctness, and structural verification is essential. So how important it is human oversight in the loop?
Yeah, you want to be able to have the checklist, the methodology. You want to be able to say, okay, it's the n and n+1 rule, right? If you prove that it works for this, and you prove that it works for n+1 and works for n+2, you can trust when it's a deterministic process, when it's mathematically proven, that is going to continue to follow that pattern all the way through. And with AI, the pattern that it uses the next time could be different than the previous time, even in the same run. It might analyze this code differently because that code pattern looks slightly different. Or the source code that it was trained on for TypeScript is a different repository than the source code it was trained on for Python.
Yeah.
right?
Uh,
So,
and oh, okay, continue, continue.
so that you're not getting down to the essential logic. You're pattern matching against an existing body of source code, which may or may not have the correct information. So just a really quick example. Um, you probably have read about how people on Reddit last year were posting false statements
Yeah.
so that it would mess up LLMs and then mess up the trainings for LLMs. I've created a pipeline where I'm relying on AI at the end of my pipeline to do the localizations that we have for Sonde. We're going to be global, and we want to support every language. And we care a lot about human accessibility, so we want to support every language that people might be using for their computer usage. And Scots is a language that currently no LLM supports. And the reason why is because there was a high school kid in the United States who created a website where he invented English translations for Scots. Either he thought it was funny or whatever his goal was. And all of the LLMs that currently support Scots, support it, are based on his bogus training material. They read his vocabulary as the authoritative reference for how to do Scots. So if you think about not knowing what the AI was trained on for the language of the source code that you're generating, you don't know how good the code was that it was based on. You don't know how good the code is that it generates unless you're actually doing quality analysis on the code that it generates.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that you mentioned all this process, which is very interesting, are there new skills engineers must develop, or what do you think for this AI control and the coding skills is not enough?
Yeah, I mean, they don't need to be using Sonde, but they need to have processes.
But they should use some because you have a lot of experience and what you're building is very interesting for them.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping that a lot of people adopt Sonde. But even if they don't, the processes that they need to have in place, there are definitely patterns that AI tends to generate, and we have probes like under Code Elegance and other stuff underneath Sonde. You can start to guide AI, but the problem is you're going to need to always repeatedly check it again because it will forget and it will start to fall back to what its original training was. If you have a more rigorous set of coding standards, you're going to need a lint checker. You're going to need other tools to monitor what the AI code produces. And you can't, there are some really good, really impressive CI agents that do code review for you. But again, they are pattern matching. They are not deterministic. They're going to miss things, and you have to constantly train and tune them for how you want the code to work. So sure, having another AI reviewing your code will probably help. But again, you can't be sure of everything that it's covering. And I'm not trying to make it a boogeyman or anything like that. It's just anyone who understands how AI generates and analyzes code will admit it's not deterministic. It's not idempotent. Anytime you run it, you might get something different than the last time. How can you trust that?
Yeah, it's so hard to trust if you put it in that way. And on the organization side, what do you think is more about infrastructure, tooling, culture, governance? What do you think?
Well, a big part of the problem is what we mentioned earlier in the conversation is you start to lose understanding of your code base of how things work, right? And you can bring on junior engineers. We're seeing vibe coded people who have never developed software before building amazing ideas. And they're great ideas, but we're already hearing 6 months down the road, they run into blockers that they can't resolve without redoing a huge portion of what they've already built, because of the way the AI code developed them into a corner. So you need to understand what it is that you built. It's like you don't need to understand how your car works, but you need to have a mechanic that will fix your car, right? You can't just say, oh, well, okay, my car's not working, so I'm going to open up the hood and start taking things out, right? There has to be something that can do the quality, that can give you the specifics, that can give you the repeatable processes. So whether it's Sonde or something else, you need to have something in your workflow that's our classic tests. Like, you run the tests. And another thing you need to watch out for is AI will often, not often, but I have seen it change the actual test to get the test to pass, rather, because its goal is to just finish and make you happy.
Yeah.
It will change the code so the test passes, so that it can check off, okay, I've done that, rather than saying, oh no, I don't change the test. Like I've caught Claude doing this, where it's like, wait, you just changed the test.
Yeah.
Don't start changing the test. That test is there for a reason. So and AI is great at generating tests. The more you can, so a technique, if you don't want to buy Sonde, if you don't want to build your own deterministic analyzer, is you focus on making sure that your AI writes deterministic tests for you. Just like with financial stuff, when you ask about AI math, can be really funny, right? You ask it something and it will come up with an answer that is not mathematically correct.
Yes.
What you do instead is you make it write code that is proven to be correct, so that your system relies on the code, because AI will follow an algorithm and generate the code for it. But every time it starts to handle something or fix something itself, you never know what it's going to. So you have to guide it to produce the deterministic code that you need for your system to rely on and for the infrastructure to rely on. And I'm just, I build developer tools because I'm lazy, although I never actually get to be lazy, because I'm always realizing there's something else I can build.
Yes.
Right? But I built Sonde so that I can set these rules and forget about them. Once Sonde has them and they're deterministic and they're guaranteed to be part of the monitoring process, I can move on to the next issues. And I don't have to manually go through my AI code for every PR as thoroughly as I used to, because Sonde now catches a lot of the things way faster than I ever would have caught them, because it can process tens of thousands of lines of code a second. And, that's way faster than a human. So,
Yeah.
So it's really, you have to put in those checks and balances for AI. So whether you approach it the way Sonde does, or you come up with a smarter way, more maintainable way, great, but you can't just take what the agentic development produces as the status quo.
Yes. It's very important what you say, and also it's very important to have a little knowledge for using AI, because you can't trust at all. So, thank you so much for sharing these insights, John. It's fascinating to see how AI generated code can be accelerated while remaining reliable, right? So,
Yeah.
but before we wrap up, is there anything else you wish more companies understood about using AI in software development? Anything else you want to share?
Um, I think the main thing is that you can't surrender your thinking to the agents. They can be great partners, but they are not the pair programmer that you need for making sure that you have quality code. Um, and also, people I see on LinkedIn every day people saying, "Yeah, I'm losing touch with code. I'm losing my coding skills." And that's also something that I built into Sonde, so that everything that it discovers for you, there are references for the findings that it produces, so that if you have any motivation at all, you can just click on the link that
Yeah.
it provides for the document, for the original source of what it is analyzing, so that you can understand what it found and why it should matter to you. So I'm trying to institute in Sonde that retraining or continuous training or continuous learning that got me into software in the first place. I love it because it's always changing, and there's always something new to learn. And AI makes that no different. But the thing is, people are just relying on AI to figure everything out, and that's a zero sum game. The more AI generates AI code, the lower the quality of all code is going to be.
Okay. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your time and for your insights and sharing your perspective. What you have to share is incredibly valuable. I know that our audience is going to be so happy to hear all your experience and thoughts.